Hello everybody and welcome on in, and my name is Jenfire, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I hear quite a lot recently, I wish I could build like you, or how do you come up with the builds that you do? How do you come up with your concepts and your designs? Well, today we're going to do something different. Today I'm going to show you around some of my test worlds, have a look at how I think about how I do my thought process behind some of my builds. And I'm also going to show you some hints, tips, and resources that you can use as well. So I hope this is useful to you for those who have been asking these questions. First of all, easiest resource you can have, make yourself a test world. This is one of mine. It might look like a random assortment of things, and that's exactly what it is. Every time I come across an idea or a design or a concept that I like, I will fire up my test world. This one example, I was seeing what chains could attach to where they look like they're coming from the center block, and I found quite a few useful things. Ignore the faces in the background. I love to play with banners. But I put everything in my test worlds, from block palettes to gradients, chandeliers I've liked the look of in real life that I've tried to replicate, fences, everything. Over here, you can kind of see a thought process that turned into a building. One day I was looking at all the different terracottas, and I like this one in particular. And I noticed that when you put the 4 blocks together, you get a kind of a fan in the middle. I decided to do that block for block over here, and then I noticed there was a second fan in the pattern as well. It was the blue one. So I decided to do that. Well, then I thought, well, this one kind of looks like a flower. So I took those colors and I tried to make them into a flower. Then I backtracked a little. I was like, well, it kind of looks like a fan or a windmill of some description. What if I just do it as a curved one, but as the one arch, not the two, to make it look like a petal? Okay, so if I was going to do it as a windmill, I'd need to flip it on its axis, right? If I'm going to do a windmill that big, it kind of needs to be higher up off the ground with a building underneath it. Kind of like the ones you would see in pictures, like the ones in Holland in the tulip fields. So then I ended up doing a mock-up of a building that it would go on. You can see where it would go on here. This is one of my very first times I actually laid out a thought process. Now I'm just going to hop across to my main test world. This was my original one, but I did start up a new one recently. This one is my main test world. This is where I do all my recent things. And you can see there is a lot, and it extends for quite a distance in most directions. Like, example, I've got all my dragons are over in that direction. We're going to see that in a little while. This is why I came here. People keep telling me, I wish I could build like you. How do I change from just a plain mud hut to actual buildings? This is how I did it. Now, we've all done this. We've all made a mud hut. We've all made a square. We're going to look at the footprint of this. Now, the footprint is what it leaves on the ground. This one would be just a plain square. Its 3D frame is the cube. So I thought, okay, well, what if I change the shape of the footprint? What if I make it longer? If I make it longer, we've got a rectangle. Well, if I make that into a 3D frame, well, then we have cuboid. Okay, that's the start of a house then. Well, if I'm going to do a house, how am I going to get into it? Do I need a door? Am I going to have some kind of a trapdoor? I opted for a simple 2-high door. Okay, so once I'm inside the house, what am I going to have? Am I going to have a focal feature? Is it going to be practical? Is it going to go all the way up through the roof? Is it going to be pretty or is it going to be functional? It's tall enough I can put a second floor in here. Am I going to have a second floor? How am I going to get up there? Am I going to use stairs? Am I going to use a bubble column? How am I going to do that? Okay, so it's starting to look like a house now. What about a roof? Am I going to put a roof on it? Is it going to be your standard triangle roof? Is it going to be shaped? How are we going to do this? Is that focal feature, is a chimney, is it going to go through the roof or not? Like, okay, so that kind of looks like a house now. Then I thought, well, what materials am I going to use? So I started to plot that out as well. Is it going to have a foundation layer? Is it going to have any windows? Am I going to use one color or am I going to use a gradient? What wood am I going to use for the door? That fireplace? What's it going to look like? Again, is it going to be pretty or practical? Those stairs I made. What wood am I going to use? What is the second floor going to be made out of? What is the roof going to be made out of? Is it going to be easy materials to gather? So I eventually made my first house, as aside from a mud hut. Well, then I thought again, okay, so that was just with a cuboid, with a rectangle. What if I put a couple of shapes together to make a footprint? All right. So that looks a bit different. Now we're going to go over here because I continued this thought process over here looking at footprints. Okay, so if we stick a couple of squares together, that looks kind of cool. What would that be? Would that be the foot of a tower? What's the tower going to look like? Some of you may recognize this from Truly Bedrock Season 4 in the Humble Hills. This was a building that Slack used. This is only the little one, though. When I say the little one, what do you mean? I mean, well, there's a bigger version over there with a bigger footprint. And I thought, oh, we can do circles as well. Doesn't have to be just squares. So that is how I started to change my builds from just a regular dirt hut to actual buildings. Another thing I do, this building here is a perfect example of this, is sometimes I will see pictures of buildings that I like on the internet. This one here is actually from a game. This is a building from another game called Elder Scrolls Online. I was just Googling pictures and this one was particularly inspiring to me, so I tried to recreate it in Minecraft. And I'm quite happy with it. So I just have a play around sometimes, but again, if I come up with a concept or an idea or something, fire up a test world and come and have a look around. Look, I tried to do interior things over here as well. Specifically for a bathroom. Got all kinds of color palettes going on, trying to merge them, what looks good with what. Concept designs for nether tunnels. Concept designs for storage rooms. When they brought out the frog lights, what colors go with these frog lights? What can we do with these? And the new woods, what do they go well with? It's always worth firing up a test world and having a little play around with what goes with what. But like I said, I don't usually invite people into my test worlds, but you're having a sneaky peek behind the scenes of what goes on in my brain. On to the next part, I'm going to show you some useful tips and tools that you can use. Now, the first one is this. I use a lot of circles in my builds or curves. This has become very useful. Now, I went online, I went onto Google, and I searched Minecraft circle template. And this is the thing that came up. Now, this might look a little bit confusing and colorful to some people. But if you actually look at it, this is the center of your circle. And if we count the blocks out, we can make a circle from these. Here is the specific picture that I found in order to create this. It is a useful tool. I'm going to put it up on the screen now so you can pause it if you need to copy it. From the circles, we move on to spheres. Let's make it 3D. Now for this, I did struggle a little bit at first, but then I found a really useful tool. If you have access to the internet, which you do because you're watching my video right now, then you have access to something called plots. Now plots is free to use, and we're going to show you a little bit about that now. This is plots, and it's plotz.co.uk. Now we have sphere, ellipsoid, torus, ellipse, observatory, wizard tower, lighthouse, and giant snowman. These are all different generators that can use. Now we're only interested in the sphere one here, so we're going to click this. And as you can see, it comes up with a sphere. Now it's got two functions here. The size is the bottom bar. You can see this is 32. And as it says in the top corner here, the bottom slider adjusts the diameter. So that's 32 from wall to wall. Now you can adjust this if you want a bigger one or a smaller one. It is entirely up to you. What I like about this is on this slider, you can select the layer that you need to do. So if we go right down here to the bottom, that's step 1. Then we're going to add the next layer, then the next one, then the next one. And this is how I learned to do spheres, is by using this program. I learned the patterns that I need for the spheres. Also, as well as the 3D version here, if we look in the top corner, we've got a 2D version. And that again will show you the layout of the different layers, but in a 2D grid. So this is an invaluable tool that you can use. Highly recommend this. We're just gonna come over here for a second to some of my little diggers and trucks and stuff. Now you can see here around this one in particular, there is a bounding box. And that's because of this block here, which is a structure block. Now the reason I've done this is because a friend of ours within the community, Mad Hatter, there is a link down below to his website, has created a useful little thing for Bedrock called Structura. It's the Bedrock equivalent of Lightmatica, and in this I can take my design here and I can put it through a structure block and I can create almost like a hologram that I can import onto another world, so I can copy it block for block. All the information on that is in the description below. I'll let you go take a look at his website. That is a very useful tool as well. Something else that I like to use as well, again made by a friend of ours in the community, by Chewbacca. If I put this armor stand down and I give it a banner, you can see I've got some chunk lines here. That's because I am using a special pack. that has been made. All the packs that I use are actually what Slack Lizard has shown me, and they're all available in his Discord in packs section. So there's quite a lot of functions on this one. The first one is chunk borders, which is a very useful thing when you're doing farms and stuff like that. If I wiggle it, it has a spawning sphere. And if I move it again, it moves it. And there are different versions of this. There is the one that I use, which is Chewy's, or again, Hatter has a technical pack as well. Follow his links for details. And these are all things that I use when I'm doing farms, when I'm plotting out things, because losing bees and entities and minecarts to chunk borders is not what you want to do when you're plotting stuff out. So that is something that I consider when I'm placing things in a world, is I use these packs to make sure that they're in the right place. Some of you may recognize some of these builds from my current season of Truly Bedrock, which is Season 5, because this is where I do all my testing. Now this over here is where I keep my dragons and where I do my dragon designs. And you can see I start my dragons off with the spheres, which we went into earlier. From the spheres, I build up bases and models. You can see this one in particular. I have different areas marked out in different colors for different things. I even have experimented with frills on this one. Experimented with how to put the neck on this one. How I do my smaller dragons is what people wanted to know. How I do my smaller dragons is I start with a noodle. I start with a wool noodle. On this noodle, I plot out the length of the body, and then where I'm going to put things like the shoulders or the wings and the back legs. How long is the tail going to be? Once I've done that for a basic length, I will change the trajectory of it. I will change the angles. And then I will plot out what I want those legs to look like. What do I want the wings to look like? Are they open? Are they gliding? What position are we going to be in? What about the head? Is the mouth going to be open? Which way are we looking? Over here, I have a multiple concept. So we have the body. Okay, so if we're not flying like these ones, what if we're laying down? You can see we've got the purple body there and we're on a platform. Now, if we're in a tree or something like that, high up, are we going to be grabbing onto something for stability? You can see I've done different curves here, again using that circle template that I showed you earlier, because I needed to get different size curves. And that's how I worked out how to do spirals, was using that tool. So back to this. Are we grabbing onto anything? Are we? If we're lying down, do we have our wings out? Or do we have our wings curved around the body? I used the blue for this one. Or if we're sitting down, do we have our normal head that is up and alert, potentially breathing fire? Or are we sleeping? Do we have the mouth closed? What about neither of those? What if something's caught this dragon's attention? What if we're looking to the side? Or back over the shoulder? And that one was a particularly difficult one because that one was on a diagonal. But through this model, I have managed to do quite a few of my little baby dragons. Now, when I say little baby dragons, they look small here, but when they're actually in a survival world, they're actually a lot bigger than I thought they were. Always good to have something for scale. Get it? Scale? Oh, never mind. One thing to consider as well is not all dragons are the same. We're going to go into that in a separate video. You guys have been asking for a video on different types of dragons. So we are going to be making that at some point. One of the things to consider there is what type of wings are you going to have. This is a fey dragon. Now, again, I went onto the internet and I googled a picture of butterfly wings. Specifically looking at bead patterns. Bead patterns are useful because they're quite often laid out in a grid. So they're easy to transfer into Minecraft. So I copied a monarch butterfly wing into the world, and then I came over here and tried to put it on an angle. How would it attach to the dragon? What angle is it gonna be at? That's just a little look into my thought processes behind some of my builds and some of the tools and tips and tricks that I use. I hope this has been insightful for some of you. I know a lot of you have been asking for this. Please let me know what you think in the comments. I don't often show people around my test world. This is all new to me. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm going to leave that one there, and I'll see you next time. Don't forget to come and join the Discord if you have any more questions to ask, or you can join me on Twitch and ask me live in person. Links are below. I'll see you next time. A big thank you to all my wonderful Patreons that have supported me on this entire journey. Love your faces. Bye!